Sons and daughters of the living God, happy Sabbath. Today's sermon is on waiting. Usually, when I write my sermons, beginning of the week, they're done. This sermon did not come so quickly. I spent a lot of time waiting whilst writing a sermon on waiting. What occurred to me was this, though. Last night, whilst I was still struggling with this sermon, my wife had put our kids to bed. And my wife, who is brilliant and wise, she stayed up far too late into the night as we discussed these things, going over them. And then she woke up in the morning again and helped me further. And I realized that if the word of the Lord had have come at the beginning of the week, I wouldn't have experienced the kindness of my wife as she helped me last night. It's just sweet. That's the preamble to the sermon. That's not the sermon. Harrison O'Keefe, in 2013, woke up in his tugboat off the coast of Nigeria. He was working as the chef. He gave his prayers as he usually does each morning, went and turned on the hot plates and then went to the bathroom, at which point the wave struck. The boat turned upside down. Water became coming in very, very quickly. The toilet, which was now on the roof, fell down and struck him on the head. Water began pouring into that bathroom. He tried to open the door, but the door was jammed shut. Being a resourceful person, he looked around. There were some louvers on the wall. He pulled them off. They were made of steel. He wedged them in, opened the door. That was one door. There was another door. The hatch was closed as it should be. He frantically began trying to open it. As water was pouring in, he couldn't open it. He heard the sounds of his other crewmates in other areas of the boat, struggling. He kept fighting with this door, and it would not open. So eventually he said, "Listen, this isn't the plan." He went further up into the bow of the boat, and there he found an air pocket. Within a minute, though, the boat had sunk 100 feet deep, and he felt it rest on the floor. The lights had gone out. It was dark. Luckily, he found a couple of life jackets. We have a picture of him here. In this air pocket, he found a couple of life jackets. They had some torches, which was good. He, at one point, made a rope so he could swim back and forth through the maze that was this upturned vessel as he tried to continue to work on this door to see if he could swim to freedom. But eventually he realized he was absolutely stuck. So he decided to make himself a raft in the bow of this boat. Tore some wood down, grabbed the life jackets, and set himself up in this air bubble that was slowly getting smaller and smaller. He had done everything that he could to survive, and now he just had to wait. Silence, anguish, not sure what was going to happen. He says, as he sat there, he sung all of the church songs that he knew. He thought of his mother and his family. He wasn't sure how the time was passing. 60 hours later, he saw some bubbles and a light. The rescue divers had come to retrieve what they thought were the bodies. If you're feeling brave, you can go to YouTube and you can see the video footage from the rescue diver's helmet. What happens is this rescue diver swims into this cavity, and as he swims up, he sees Harrison's hand. And he says, "Oh, I found a body." As he reaches out towards the hand, Harrison's hand reaches out towards his. I would have lost it at that point. I would have been done. But the rescue diver actually does very well and very quickly. He said, he's alive, he's alive. They put the rescue gear on him, take him out. He has to spend 3 days in the decompression chamber halfway up. Here's a picture of him in that decompression chamber. I love this photo. You can see that the rescue divers are very happy, but Harrison is clearly over the whole situation. He's done. They get him out, and he's surprisingly okay. The first thing he does is he goes and he takes his wife, and he says, listen, I'm alive, this is great, let's go for a holiday to the beach, which is... Of all the things to do, listen, if I went through an experience like that, I am moving to Nebraska, okay? I would be scared of a bowl of water for the rest of my life. He takes his wife. He experiences trauma. Time and time again, he dreams that his bed is sinking and he picks his wife up and runs out of the room. But he begins to become okay. We will continue his story later on. But there's that moment, you can see it, where he is sitting in the bow of that boat, having done everything he can and just simply waiting, not knowing. In the Christian faith, there's a form of waiting that is relatively clear. There is a waiting when God has given us a promise. There is a prophetic word as to what is going to occur, and we know it is going to occur, and we simply have to wait in patience. Okay? Jesus came incarnated. When he was here, he said, listen, I have come once, I am coming back again. Just wait and be patient. We know the outcome. All we have to do is endure that time. There are times in people's lives when they are given a prophetic word from the Lord as to what they have to wait for. Simeon, you will see the Messiah before you pass away. And so he does. He waits. But then in the Christian life, there's the waiting when you do not know what God is going to do. There is the waiting when you do not have a prophetic word as to what is going to occur. You are praying your prayers, and they are good prayers. You are praying for healing. You are praying for work opportunities. You are praying for relationships restored. But you don't know if God is going to say yes, no, or maybe. And so you find yourself feeling like you're stuck upside down in a boat, not sure, knowing what is going to happen next. God might say yes. God might not. And that is a place which is hard to wait in. It can be a place where you feel anxiety and fear. Now, there are sometimes in those moments the temptation to pursue easy answers when you find yourself in that fear. And there are some people who will give easy answers, and let me be honest, they do great damage to the body of Christ. It looks like this. They say, listen, whatever it is you desire, if you come here to this church, to my church, and you pay me the right amount of money, and you believe hard enough, and you pray hard enough, everything you want, you will get everything. You want a boat? This is the church where everybody gets a boat. And what they do is they create this self-selecting system where everybody in that church are either the people who have gotten boats or are the people who still want boats. And everybody who doesn't have a boat just quietly slips away. But the pastor stands up the front and says, look, it's successful. Look, I've proved it. But in the process, they do great damage to the body of Christ. Because if you are paying attention, which I know you are, we worship a good God. We worship a God who cares about you and wants to answer your prayers and does. And also, whilst, as Andy Stanley says, very clearly and very well, following Jesus will make you better at life and it will make your life better. The reality is faithful, good Christians in this world are still subject to random genetic mutations. The brokenness of this world car crashes, pain, chaos, and loss. So what do we do? How do we wait? I grew up in Papua New Guinea. My parents were missionaries, incredible childhood. I heard firsthand from people there incredible stories of God's intervention. But I also heard from the exact same people stories of catastrophic loss and senseless violence and meaninglessness and just brokenness that they fought in and fought against and experienced in their lives. So what do you do? How do you wait when you don't know what God is going to do? Turn with me to Acts chapter 12, verse 1. About that time, King Herod Agrippa began to persecute some believers in the church. He had the apostle James, John's brother, the James of the disciples, killed with a sword. And when he saw how well that went, he also arrested Peter. This took place during the Passover. He imprisoned him, putting him under guards, and he said, listen, once the Passover is over, we'll put him to trial, we'll kill him, people will love me. What do you do in that situation when you're the early church? Verse 5 is fascinating. But while Peter was in prison, the church prayed very earnestly for him. It's fascinating, isn't it? Here you have the early church. Many of these people had witnessed Jesus' miracles. They had seen Jesus himself. They had seen the miracles that got the early church going. And then in this moment, one of their leaders, James, has been beheaded. And now Peter has been arrested and he is following the same fate. And you can see them. What do we do in this situation? We know the miracles, but we just lost James. James is a good person. James doesn't deserve this. How do we practice our faith as we go forward in these moments? I love what they did. Verse 5. But while Peter was in prison, the church prayed very earnestly for him. 3 things from that very one sentence I want to give you today. The first thing is that their church, they showed up even though they weren't sure. Following Jesus can be confusing. They were following the Messiah who they thought would overthrow the Roman Empire, but then he didn't. And then he was crucified, but then he rose again. He said, listen, eat my body and drink my blood. Their expectations of what it was like to follow Jesus, they didn't know what was coming next. But even though they were unsure, they still continued to show up. In your life, when you don't know what God is going to do next, continue to do the thing that you do know you should do. Do not let what you don't know prevent you from doing what you do know you should do. They continue to show up even though they're unsure. They come with this trusting position to God, and that, I think, is a beautiful thing. Show up even though they are unsure. Then the next thing they do is they are there praying together. They are simply continuing to do the last thing that they were told to do, even in the face of uncertainty. The early church was instructed by Jesus, gather together, pray, be the church, do these things. And in this moment where members are being persecuted, it would have been very tempting for them to sneak off into the sidelines, to go and hide, and yet simply what they do is they say, listen, we don't know what is coming and we don't know what to expect, but we will simply continue to do the last thing that Jesus told us to do. We will continue to be the church. Again, I don't know what you're facing. I don't know how these things are going to resolve in your life, but I do know that you should continue to do the things that God told you to do. We as the church, we were told to go into all the world, baptizing people, making disciples. Or in the words of Christ for that final judgment scene, he says, listen, it's simple. Feed those who are hungry. If they're thirsty, give them a drink. If they need provisions, give them clothing. If they have failed society's moral standards and are in prison, just go and visit them. It's simple. Just do the things that you know you should do and the things that you were last told to do. If you've got kids, you know how this goes, don't you? My kids, we're going on an adventure. Let's go out today. I need you to grab your hats and your water bottles and your shoes and your backpacks and meet me at the door. And before they do those things, they come to you with a million questions. And it's like, please, just do the last thing that I told you. That is just what we need to do now. There is stuff in the future that we will talk about, but right now, just keep doing what you know you should do. And then the early church. Again, they gathered together and they prayed earnestly for Peter. I love this moment. They gather together for each other because they know that they need each other. In this moment when their community is being torn apart, they come together. They are needing company and community in this moment. And in that moment, as they go towards each other, they both fulfill each other's desires and become the answer for the other person's desires. It's a good moment. In this world, very often, there is a symbiotic relationship between your desires and somebody else's needs. And as you are waiting, do not waste your waiting. Find the opportunity to see what you can do in those moments. Let me illustrate it like this. If you are praying to God for children, first of all, my heart goes out to you. That is not an easy place to be in. And I know there are some people who have found success and God has answered their prayers, and other people, they have not experienced that. As you pray and as you wait, see if you can find the place where your desires meet the world's needs. It's not to give up on your prayers, but it might help you through the moment. Just this last weekend, I took a group of my high school students down to an orphanage in Mexico. It's a beautiful orphanage. It's really well run. As my high school kids were doing beautiful work there, a couple of them, they came up to me and they said, Chris, we were there in the nursery. And as we were holding these little babies, they just kind of melted into us. They just need to be held. That's what babies need. But when we went to go and put them down, they began to cry. There are children down there who just simply need love and attention. Your desires could be meeting the needs of this world if you went down there and volunteered. It's not to deny God's purpose in your life, but in that process, you could learn to be a parent. You could be giving the gift of time and attention to these children. There are ways in which you can live and not waste the waiting. Perhaps you are praying for a partner. Perhaps you are praying for somebody to spend the rest of your life with. That is a good prayer. In that moment, though, in the waiting, practice showing up. When you're married to someone, you're there with them in the thick and the thin. Practice showing up like that in your friendships. Continue your prayers. It might be a yes, it might be a no, but in the meantime, you have learned something. You might be praying for a healing, and you don't know how it's going to go. In the meantime, though, you can join a foundation and raise money for research. In the meantime, you can join a support group. In the meantime, you can find people who might be further behind you in the diagnostic journey, and you can be the support for them, and they can be the support for you. In the meantime, do not waste you're waiting. The early church, they gathered there together. There's one other character, though, that we shouldn't ignore in this moment, and that is Peter in prison. The good news, and the spoiler here, is simply that Peter gets out of prison, and we know this because we have his book later in the Bible. But what was Peter doing while he was waiting? In that situation, not knowing what God was going to do, we find his thoughts recorded here in 1 Peter 1, 6-8. He says this, "In all this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. Though you may not have seen him, you love him, and even though you do not see him now, you believe in him and are filled with an inexpressible and glorious joy." Peter's there in prison. He has had people chasing him. He has a price on his head. He has seen his friends, in some cases, suffer for the gospel, and in other cases, be miraculously protected. And so what does he do? Peter takes the long view. That's what he does. He says, listen, I lived a life where I saw the Christ live one of the best lives ever, and yet ended in a Roman crucifixion. And then 3 days later, I saw the Christ again. And so in light of that, in light of the long view, in light of the Christ coming back, these trials and tribulations, what he is simply saying is this. For Peter, if Christ is not raised from the dead, nothing else matters. But if Christ is raised from the dead, then nothing else matters. These trials that I go through, they are simply opportunities for my faith to be refined and tested and proven. I don't need to know what is going to come of this, but I will be the sort of person who takes the long view. So what happened with the rest of this story? The church gathers together earnestly praying. The night before Peter was to be placed on trial, he was asleep, fastened with 2 chains between 2 soldiers. There they are standing at the guard. And then an angel of the Lord comes and strikes him on his side and wakes him up. Get up. The chains fall off his arms. And what I love is this detail that we find in verse 9. He stands up, he follows the angel. Peter left the cell, but all the time he thought it was a vision. He didn't realize that it was actually happening. They pass the first and the second gate. They go out through the gate. It opens miraculously. Verse 11, Peter finally came to his senses. It's really true, he says. The angel of the Lord has saved me. It's a fascinating moment, isn't it? Here is Peter not believing this miraculous occurrence is actually, it's too good for him to believe that it is true. The story goes on, and I love this detail. It's so cute. So he goes to the home of Mary, the mother of John Mark, where many are gathered there for prayer. He knocks on the door in the gate, and a servant girl named Rhoda came to the gate and opened it. But when she recognized Peter's voice at the door, she was so overjoyed that instead of opening the door, she ran back inside and told everyone Peter is standing at the door. I love that detail. I just think it's brilliant. But the next piece of detail is actually very interesting to note. Verse 15, they say, "You're out of your mind." There is a small pattern that I just want to alert you to here in the scriptures. Have you noticed how in the scriptures women frequently aren't believed? Sad, isn't it? Mary, I am pregnant with the Messiah. Joseph is like, really? Mary Magdalene comes running back from the tomb. I have seen the Lord, he's alive. And the disciples are like, but actually, Rhoda, Peter's at the door. You must be out of your mind. It's sad. It's very sad. And instead of apologizing, no, they decide that it must be his angel. Meanwhile, Peter continues knocking, and they finally open the door and they see him and they are amazed. And he motions for them to be quiet, and he told them how the Lord had led him out of the prison. Peter is released from the prison. And then the entire community that were gathered in prayer, do you remember what they were gathered in prayer praying for? Peter's release. And then Peter comes to the door and he's like, "Hi, I'm here." And they're like, "Can't be." This is the teaching. Church, there are some times in your life when the answer to your prayers is so great that if God tried to tell you about it now, you would not believe it. Even though you hope for it, the resolution of your hope is greater than you could ever possibly imagine now. 2 more pieces of detail and then we'll return to our friend in the boat. What happens in this moment is Herod becomes frustrated, guards are executed. He gathers the town people together and he begins speaking. The account there is fascinating because we also have it backed up by Josephus, the historian. Herod stands up and he begins speaking, and the people say, "This is the voice of a god." Josephus tells us that Herod was wearing a tunic that was laced with silver and the sun reflected upon it. And in that moment, the people say, "This is a god," and Herod does not deny the claims. And in that moment, he is struck down. Josephus tells us that he died 5 days later from worms. There's an incredible reversal of tales in this chapter. Peter begins imprisoned by Herod. For all intents and purposes, he is not getting out. But then the story ends with Peter free and Herod judged. One quick illustration, you won't forget this one, and we'll move on for it very quickly. 5 weeks ago, I was reading the news. There was a carload of 4 people, and they were taking a goat to be sacrificed. They had an accident on the way. The authorities arrived at the scene, and they said the 4 people had passed away, but the goat miraculously survived. I don't know if I should laugh at that. It's tragic, but it's an incredible reversal of fate. For all intents and purposes, no one saw that coming. At the end of this story, we find Herod no longer in charge and Peter free. What are you praying for? What are you waiting for when you do not know the outcome? A few years later, after Harrison had had his adventure in the boat, he was driving his car to work with his friend. They went off the road. The car turned upside down in a body of water. Once again, he found himself sinking upside down. The funny thing was, as though this time he wasn't as worried. He's done this before. So he gets out and he rescues his friend. And then he goes to the police station and they say, "Listen, you have to get the vehicle out of that body of water." And so he says, "Okay." And so he goes back down into the water and attaches all of the recovery gear for this, and they drag it out. What's fascinating is that should have been his greatest fear. But once that he had gone through that, he realized he wasn't scared anymore. And so if we can have that last slide up, this is what he decided to do with his life. He is now a rescue diver. I mean, the courage of that man. Talk about somebody taking the right lesson out of the wrong situation. He did not ask for his period of waiting, but he did not waste it. I don't know what you're going through. I don't know what you're praying for. but be the sort of people who hold on to God and do not waste your period of waiting. To finish, Alexandre Dumas wrote the famous book, The Count of Monte Cristo. In that story, the Count is wrongly imprisoned. He finds himself in a cell, locked away, and in that moment, he enters into a state of despair. There is nothing to live for. There is nothing to hope for. He considers ending it all. And I apologize to give you a spoiler in this book, but what happens is, from the neighboring cell, a priest digs a tunnel through. And in that moment, the Count, this fictional character, encounters hope. And it is that hope that allows him to move and escape and make his way out of that prison cell, and it moves him through to the rest of his journey in life. The end of that famous novel is this incredible quote: "Until the day when God will deign to reveal the future to humankind, all human wisdom is contained in these two words: wait and hope." Church, in this life, it is too easy to be the people who face despair and return to it time and time again. It is too easy to fall for the immediacy of despair. Instead, as people of faith, we are simply called to be those who hope and wait on the Lord that is good. Let us be the people of hope and patience.